The mid and late 1900s was a turning point in the civil rights movement for African Americans. This movement pushed hard and long for the basic human rights of African Americans, leading many people towards equality with their campaigns. One of these campaigns was a nonviolent group called the Freedom Riders. In 1958, a court case rose to the Supreme Court called Morgan v. Virginia. The verdict deemed that it was unconstitutional to segregate interstate transportation. Unfortunately, just because the Supreme Court has ruled on the issue, it is not necessarily enforced unless more government action is taken.
We saw that over a decade, not a single thing about interstate travel had changed, regardless of the Morgan versus Virginia decision. We felt like we needed to do something about it.
The Congress of Racial Equality, also known as CORE, created a campaign to bring awareness to this unlawful treatment. In 1961, CORE estimated that their movement would also gain President JFK's attention to help civil rights of African Americans.
We knew what we needed was to bring attention to ourselves with the media and have people look at the reality of the so-called desegregation of interstate travel. We had to bring a unique way to spread awareness and take action at the same time. The more we pressured them with nonviolence, the more we could get them to enforce the civil rights of African Americans.
And they did. By May 4th that same year, CORE and other allies, such as the NAACP and the Southern Christian Leadership Conference, brought together the Freedom Riders. So they set out, starting from D.C. down south. They boarded interstate buses together and went out on the road, driving forward to equality, not only with blacks, but with also whites as allies. However, these interracial road trips weren't so kindly accepted.
We knew it was going to be violent. We knew that we might get hurt, and we knew that we were going to get arrested. But who was going to do it? There would be no action taken if people weren't outraged by what they saw.
As they rode deeper into the South, the violence got stronger. In fact, on May 14th in Anniston, Alabama, a mob of Klan members attacked the first two buses, slashing their tires and then firebombing the buses. Witnesses say that the Klan members held the front bus doors shut, trying to burn them to death. Encouraging the violence were unsurprisingly the police, using the Klan members to stop the campaign, only helping when riders were near death. However, all was not for nothing. The bus burnings blew up in the news, causing massive uproar and the attention of many. U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy advised that riders should exercise restraint, but they continued. This was what they wanted, to bring awareness to the inequality and segregation, although bus drivers now refused to take them anywhere. That is when the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee came in. They were a group of young, strong-minded students who worked together to protest against inequality. They organized a way to continue the freedom ride for those who couldn't. Additional members were constantly added to the new buses when other members were arrested or hospitalized. However, they didn't stop there. All three groups, CORE, SNCC, and SLCC, continued with an additional form of protest, sit-ins. As buses came to rest stops, riders entered white-only areas, which again had caused a massive uproar as mobs began piling at the stop any buses came to. On May 20th, riders entered Montgomery with Alabama Highway Patrol, but were deserted by them when a white mob took over. Ambulances refused to take the wounded. Luckily, riders were saved by black local residents. Faced by the constant uproar caused by the campaign, the U.S. administration was forced to intervene, getting the governors to act and reduce the level of mob violence. However, that didn't stop them from arresting the riders. On May 24th, riders continued in Jackson, Mississippi, where they were all arrested for violation of segregation laws. This caused President John F. Kennedy to ask for a cool-off period, but this only made the three organizations push harder. For the next 3 months through the summer, over 400 Freedom Riders drove through the South towards Mississippi, causing massive amount of arrests to accumulate. Jail-ins were the new way that riders protested. By filling the jails and state prisons, riders caused great stress on the Treasury of Mississippi. This finally placed enough pressure on both the states and federal government. U.S. Attorney General Robert Kennedy, who was the chief law enforcement official in the nation, eventually found a legal mechanism he could use to end the campaign, pressing the Interstate Commerce Commission, the ICC, to enforce integration. Black passengers could sit anywhere on the buses, trains, or terminal lunch counters. A few years later, the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was passed, protecting all African Americans. These new policies wouldn't have happened if it weren't for the Freedom Riders, who had risked their lives and safety to see their black brothers and sisters be given the basic human right to travel alongside anyone else with no retaliation. The organizations involved used tactics and strategies to get what they needed done. This understanding of power helped the Freedom Riders get the attention they needed to enforce these desegregation laws. They'll forever remain as leaders in the civil rights movement.
We knew that what we